We're gonna get to another pandemic story here. This one it caught my eye, and it's just really distressing in terms of the overall societal impact that our response to coronavirus has had. We've previously brought you the drug overdose numbers, the heroin numbers, suicide we took a look at, but now we have some of the numbers in on childhood obesity from a massive new study from the CDC. So let's put this up there on the screen. NPR actually covered it. So American children, so this was a study that looked at 432,302 people between the ages of 2 and 19 years old. And they found that the percentage of obese children and teens increased to 22% compared with 19% before the pandemic. That overall increase is literally, if you extrapolate it to the general population, millions of children and teens who actually gained not just weight, but became clinically obese during the time of the pandemic. The BMI overall increase is especially distressing because the average weight gain for children is 8.8 pounds before the pandemic overweight to 14.6 pounds in August of 2020. That actually kicks you from like moderately obese to actually like clinically obese. And what do we know? Which is that one of the overall risk factors in COVID, probably the biggest risk factor in COVID, is obesity. And we were talking before the show, this is not to shame any parent. This is not to shame anybody out there for this happening. If you are a working class parent, especially if you're single, and you just got the school lunch, system or whatever removed out from under you, and you have to go work at the grocery store or whatever as an essential worker, or you have to struggle with COVID, unemployment, it's gonna be a tough time. It's gonna be a tough situation. It's not your fault. These are major macro decisions that were made at the overall societal level. Let's throw Alec McGillis's tweet up there on the screen because he actually also shows some of the data and the movement. The rate of body mass index increase doubled during the pandemic compared to the pre-pandemic period. So a literal doubling in the BMI increase percentage-wise for these children ages 2 and 19. And here's the thing. As anybody who's been overweight, especially me, I was overweight as a child, what do we know? Once you put it on, it's very difficult to come off.
Yeah.
Lifestyle choice, look, I'm lucky, I got gym membership, all this, I can afford to eat healthy. A lot of people can't. A lot of people have to work 2 jobs or whatever, and the easiest thing in the world whenever you're stressed in order to reach for junk food. That's literally what it is. And so you put that all together, the fact that it's cheap, the overall societal impact, and we're gonna be living with this for a really long time to come. Health-wise, but society-wise too. This really changes kind of the makeup of like who we are.
It's really sad because, and it was also very predictable because when you think about it, like, okay, you're not going to gym class anymore. You're not getting out of the house and moving around even just to walk between classes and go to gym class and have that just like daily exercise and movement built into your schedule. So that's gone. You're sitting at home. If your parents especially are financially stressed, it's not just what's easiest and can fit most readily into a super busy life where you're just trying to keep body and soul together. It's also what's cheapest.
Yeah,
so that's what's there for you. Whereas, listen, the school lunch is no great shakes.
Yeah, I didn't say it was great.
But there's at least some requirements about nutritional value. And also it's structured. So during the day, that's your only opportunity to eat. So you don't have this ability to just grab what's ever around whenever it's around. I mean, I think anybody who's shifted from like office work to working at home or had a time when they had to be at home for whatever reason can relate to suddenly you start thinking about food all day long because you just are there and it's right there. And then you layer on top of that the stress of all of this, the stress of routines radically changing, the stress of being very fearful of a dangerous disease. All of these factors, major contributors that, again, very predictable that this would be the incredibly sad and regrettable outcome because, like you said, especially weight that is gained in childhood and young adulthood, very, very difficult to ever overcome that.
It's extremely hard.
These are critical years. And so if you start off on the wrong track, it's not impossible. You proved that, certainly. But
still trying to prove it. Yeah.
It's very difficult. I mean, you work really, really hard at it. People don't know. You work every day really hard to maintain where you are. So it just brings me back to a monologue. I think I did this monologue while you were around, actually, about how there was this assumption that an abundance of caution came with no cost.
Yeah.
That the only costs were if you weren't cautious enough and there was, increased viral spread, et cetera. But there were costs on the other side of being too cautious. Now, look, I think at the beginning of the pandemic, before we knew what the impact was on kids and how at risk they were, I think it was very understandable. And I can tell you as a parent, I pulled my kids out of school even before the school shut down because you just didn't know what the risk was. But once we did find out, there wasn't an adjustment for the fact that you're going to have weight gain, you're going to have increased addiction, you're going to have increased depression, you're going to have increased suicide, you're going to have millions of kids who just have a completely lost year of school, at least, where that's going to set them back for their entire life. Because again, these are, if you're talking about kindergarten, first grade, second, these are critical years that if you lose out and you get behind, you guys know how it works, then you get tracked in a certain direction and you're always one step behind where you should have been. And that's the way the system comes to view you. And it's, again, very difficult to overcome. So like I said, I think at the beginning, it was really understandable that people just said, look, we got to keep these kids safe. And yeah, there are costs, but that's what we're going to do. But over time, we lost sight of the fact that if you do have this consistent abundance of caution approach, that there are costs, that they are really significant, and that they should be weighed and considered just as with just as much significance as the costs and the risks of the pandemic. And I just never saw that adjustment happen. And we're seeing some of the fallout, very sadly.
We are not seeing that happen. If anything, there's been an escalation. We have to do everything we can to keep children in school. I don't even, however stringent, whatever, but it has to happen. As you're pointing to, think about it too. A lot of these kids, even little kids, had to sit in front of a computer all day. You think that's healthy?
Yeah.
Go ask anybody who's ever worked a cubicle job, whether that's good. You don't have recess. You don't have the same gym class. Many people also lost their support systems through workouts in terms of school sports.
Mm-hmm.
That was a very key part for many people who develop healthy habits throughout their lives. Now that's a support system, which has been completely lost. So this has been a major societal cost, which is completely undercovered right now, except by, maybe Fox, because it'll be like lockdowns, whatever. We need to be able to talk about this without any of this culture war nonsense and just start from the very basic premise of this is a really big problem. And as you said, yeah, we can forgive it, maybe, in the first couple of months, 5 months, something like that. But after that, it was starting to become pretty clear. And there was a choice to be made. Everything is a choice. Everything has, every action has an equal and opposite reaction. And the reaction is not having any discussion right now in the mainstream.
Yeah. I think about my own kids who have almost every privilege you can imagine, except we have really, really crappy internet at our house.
See, that's a good thing.
That is one thing. It is good in certain regards, but it did make virtual schooling a little bit challenging.
Yeah.
But it was hard on my kids. My daughter, who was 12 during the year that she was out of school, she's a very extroverted person. To have those social networks cut off, and also it was hard for her to learn outside of the classroom online. It's hard for anyone to do that, and especially if you are a certain type of learner. My son was 7. Again, these are really important years. He's a little boy. He's got tons of energy, and he's distractible, and all of that. Like, for him to sit in front of a computer all day, it was tough. And those were like the best possible circumstances. And there was definitely a toll that was paid by my kids. I can only imagine what the case was for kids whose parents are super stressed, trying to work multiple jobs, single mom, all of those situations just layer on top of that additional burdens, additional difficulties. And of course, the cost fell most heavily on the most vulnerable kids who have, not only do they, of course, not have a voice in the halls of Congress, but their parents don't have a voice in the halls of Congress. So those costs have been largely ignored.
Completely agree.
Hey guys, thanks so much for watching.
That's right. Just as a reminder, you can become a premium subscriber today. Watch the full show completely uncut, our reactions to each other's monologues. You get to listen to it. You get to ask us questions, all that good stuff. Link is right there in the description or at breakingpoints.com.
Best of all, great way to say screw you to the mainstream media.